Hey everybody. Okay, before I get started with detailing, I want you guys to get your models in the best place possible in terms of their topology, which is how the geometry flows across the surface. Okay, and this is really something you don't need to do in ZBrush, but I just want to kind of show you. This is an early version of my awful sea dragon thing, and this is when I was dynameshing. Okay, and if I turn on polyframe here, you'll see how dense this is for starters. This is almost 3 million points. Okay, and if I zoom in on this, you can see that the stuff kind of comes and goes in terms of flow. You kind of see these little areas that break up into triangles and stuff, and then I've got some little edgy spots here. This is kind of rough in here. Okay, so I'll turn that off, and let me then show you a newer version of this that I remeshed. Okay, and that is this one right here. This the one? Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, there we go. I've got to dig it out here. I think it's this one. Yeah. Yeah. Now take a look at this one. And it has around 800,000 points. Okay. And if I turn on the polyframe for this, look at this. And you see how clean this is in terms of the way these points flow across the surface relates to the actual way the surface flows. Okay, and this is the big difference between a clean mesh and a dynamesh. And there's nothing wrong with the dynamesh at all. What is the difference is, and I come from a pretty much a traditional modeling background, like using Maya or Blender or something like that, where the flow of the topology is really important, so that you can animate things and it bends correctly and stuff like that. So I really like this, and it also is greatly reduced. Okay, this actually has been divided twice to get to this point. Okay, so how do you do that? Well, what you do, I'll go back to this one. Yeah, the gross one here. Okay, like that, and it doesn't look bad when that framing is not on. So what you do is you turn off Dynamesh. Okay, so you go to Geometry and you go to Dynamesh, you turn it off. Okay, you can Dynamesh it one more time if you like. Before that, it doesn't really matter. You want to keep the detail you've got though. So you turn that off. Okay, and I'm going to pause this for a sec. Okay, so you turn off Dynamesh. I think that's where I was. Sorry, I had to turn off the timer. So you turn that off. Yeah, so everything is just hunky dory like this, and then you go down to right here, Z Remesher. Okay, like that. So what this does is this runs a lovely little algorithm that looks at the curves, looks at the actual size and topology of your object, and it remeshes it based on that information. Okay, and you can tell it how big you want the final size to be. Okay, so in this case, the big caveat here is that it only goes up to 100,000. So this little slider here controls that target polygon count. Okay, I'm going to turn that up to 100. Okay, that's 100,000. So I want this to go down from 2.8 million to 100,000. That's a serious, shift in terms of size. Okay, so then you just click the button here, and you also, what I like to do is turn on Detect Edges. Okay, so that's going to look at edges and make sure they stay hard edged, if they are that way. Creases, I don't have any creases in this. It's different than edges, so don't worry about that. And I like to keep groups in case I have some groups in here that I want to do something with. Okay, so I'm going to just click the button here. And adaptive is what you want. It's going to adapt to the density. So big areas will have fewer polys. Tight areas that make tight curves will have more. Adaptive size and curve strength, I usually use those leave those at 50. it's kind of a balance between the curves and the adaptive strength of something when it's actually running this algorithm. So you can tweak that if it's not the way you like it. Okay. Okay. So we're just going to click the button here, like so, and this takes a little while to work. Okay. But it's not a terribly labor intensive thing. So I'm going to just look it up here, and I'm going to probably cut out part of this because I don't want you to have to sit and watch the slider go. Okay, so hold tight. Okay, so that took about 59 seconds on my 8-year-old Mac Mini. Okay, so it's done. Okay, if I hit Shift F now, you can see how lovely that looks, and you can see it didn't hit the target, it went bigger, because when you turn adaptive on, it's going to process, if it needs more detail, it's going to give it more detail even if it gives you more polygons. Okay, so that took me to 202,000 down from 2.8 million. Okay, so what does that mean? That means I'm going to be able to work faster, I'm going to be able to move this thing around without a lot of issues. But the big thing is it's going to give me a nice set of topology here that's going to take detail really well when we go to our next step, which is color and detailing things, adding other textures. Okay, so at this point then I can take this, and you can see it is kind of coarse in some areas, but now if I just hit Control D and divide that, see how clean that gets. I'm at 809,000 right now. And if that isn't enough, I could easily divide it again. That takes me up to 3 million. Okay, but it keeps that nice topology because it's only essentially bisecting each polygon that's already there. So I'm going to knock that down. I think this is going to be fine for the detail I want to do. And this is how I got to the one that I showed you earlier, which is this one. Okay, and you can see that this one I went and did a little more detail with. Around 800,000. Okay, I added my kind of thick detail here, and then I'm going to put scales, and I'm going to detail the fins more and do some more detail around the eyes and things like that. Okay, as we go. And remember, you can try this out, and if you don't like it, you can just save as before you try it, and then go back to the one you prefer if you want to do that. Okay, but this is a really really useful part of ZBrush. This came in, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and I make use of this in everything I do because it really optimizes the geometry beautifully. So, and again, if I were going to take this into Maya or take this into Blender, I could knock it down even farther and make a normal map of the details and things like that. So it's a really useful thing to at least know that it's there, even though you may not know what the heck I'm talking about when I'm describing it at this point. There's also a video on my YouTube channel, I think, that deals with a skull that's really super dense and really gross, and remeshing it and bringing it down to this nice, really pretty looking mesh. Okay, so you can look for that if you're interested in more detail about this. Okay, so on to the rest of this. So I'll get out of here and start with materials and painting.